Normally, it's designed by economists. Is economics a science? If so, can the theories be tested? How can you experiment with major tax changes? One Treasury Secretary was given the freedom to do so. He made changes for 8 years to confirm his theories. I'd like to introduce Richard Soderholm, tax theory. Tax theory, Richard Soderholm.
Indian fellow Toastmasters, tax theory. Sounds a little boring. What are taxes for? Revenue or politics? Economists and politicians often disagree. Tonight I'm going to review the historical record, look at the last 100 years. I'm not going to mention current events. I have a handout which I hope is distributed. It's rather detailed, but you can study it later. Each national crisis needs more revenue, so there's always a sudden tax increase. After it's over with, some of the smarter people crunch numbers and see what really happened. We'll look at a few of these cases. Go back 100 years ago, end of World War I, left huge debts. Woodrow Wilson was the president. Economy was in bad shape. The top income tax rate was 73%. Federal deficit was $20 billion. The unemployment was over 11%. 1921, Warren Harding was elected president. The smartest thing he ever did, he appointed Andrew Mellon as Secretary of the Treasury. Mellon was considered a brilliant financier. He's the third wealthiest man in the United States. He had started Gulf Oil and Alcoa companies. And Harding asked Mellon to fix things without increasing the debt, do whatever you need. Gave him a free hand. Mellon said excessive taxes decrease investments. Investment money goes into safe tax havens when the taxes are too high. Mellon disliked tax-free bonds, but he couldn't get Congress to stop them. Mellon was Secretary of the Treasury for 8 years under Harding and Coolidge, 21 to 1929. He experimented greatly with tax reduction steps. These are shown in your top graph, but I'll tell you about them. They started out, the tax rate was 73%. Over his 8 years, he made numerous reductions, ending up with the top tax rate at 24%. The lowest rate started out at 4%. At the end of his 8 years, it was 1/2 of 1% income tax. Every year, the revenue increased. They paid off the national debt in 2 years. Had a surplus after that. During the Coolidge years, the average unemployment was about 3%. The average inflation was less than 1%. The best economic data we've had in the past 100 years. Revenue increased every year, and more of the total tax was paid by the high earners. This is kind of hard to see. The second chart shows it, but it takes a lot of studying, so we'll look at it later. They had a budget surplus most of those years. 1929, stock market crashed. New administration, Franklin Roosevelt, his new dealers, total different approach on things, very socialistic. They were anti-business. They greatly increased taxes. They openly discussed class warfare and the war on business. 1935 Revenue Act increased the maximum tax rate to 79%. They needed more money for their programs. They added a progressive tax on corporate earnings. And 2 years later, they had a new tax on corporate undistributed profits. Companies had no money. They complained, they can't expand, we have no money to invest, we can't buy equipment, we can't hire anybody. Nothing changed. Industry stayed flat for the rest of the 1930s. Many people blame the tax basis. Finally, Depression ended with the defense programming after the war started. High taxes remained during World War II, which is normal. You have to pay for the war. You want to discourage inflation. The next tax decrease was by John F. Kennedy proposed in 1963. He proposed a tax reduction, about $13 billion tax cut, which included reduction of the top income tax rate from 91% down to 65%. And reduced the bottom rate from 20% to 14%, plus reducing some business taxes. The Congress rejected it. They said we couldn't handle a deficit. Kennedy was replaced by Lyndon Johnson. In 1964, Lyndon Johnson passed the Kennedy tax cut. Unemployment fell from 5.2% in 64 to 4.5% in 65 and to 3.8% in 66. They predicted a big deficit, didn't occur. Tax revenues increased in 64 and 65. After that war in Johnson, everything changed again. 1981, Ronald Reagan incorporated huge tax increases. Cut the top marginal rate from 70% to 50%, reduced the number of other taxes. 1 year later, he had to increase taxes because congressional spending had grown so fast that the deficit was growing alarmingly. Congressional spending became out of control during that time, plus defense buildup. And there are a number of tax increases during the next 6 years of Reagan's administration, including increases in Medicare tax, increases in the retirement tax. Ultimately, results were undefined. You had too many changes at one time, and there's no good analysis. His supporters say it worked, his distractors say it didn't. In 2001, George Bush projected had tax decreases, made some increase in the economy. The data's not in yet. It's not been analyzed. Two different sides argue over it, so there's no answers there. What can we say? In conclusion, very high tax rates discourage investment and seem to lock up the economy. Moderate tax rates, or improvement, seem to help things. However, spending has to be under control at the same time. Otherwise, you have a disruption and the systems don't work. There's advocates of both sides. Thank you.